Good day. Console versus PC. It's a war that will likely never cease. Now for me, I am a PC man through and through. But back when I was a kid, my grandfather's computer, which was extremely powerful for the time, was, well, his computer. So when he was using it, I had to have an alternative. Now growing up, I did have several consoles, and I still do have an Xbox 360 and PS2 that I use on a somewhat regular basis. Now, my personal favorite console of all time is the N64. That's mainly because the N64 was more or less the late 90s equivalent of the Xbox or Xbox 360. It was so powerful that it could actually run PC games with only a few graphical downgrades. Its rather odd controls worked surprisingly well for a first-person shooter, and one could almost consider it a predecessor for the Xbox-style controller. Throughout the 90s, Doom was ported to every console imaginable, and every port was basically just the same game, with the only variation being in how much had to be cut out due to console limitations. Well, the N64, being the Turok and GoldenEye powerhouse it was, did not just get a port like the lowly PlayStation, rather it got its very own original Doom game called, appropriately enough, Doom 64. Now, Doom 64 can be seen as the love child of Quake 1 and Doom. It has the kick-ass action of Doom and the spooky, intense atmosphere of Quake. Doom 64 has all new sprites for the enemies, power-ups, and weapons. Furthermore, all of the sprites are far more detailed than the ones seen in the previous Dooms, which is not all that surprising since Doom came out in 97, whereas Doom 1 and 2 came out in 93 and 94 respectively. The levels for Doom 64 are also vastly improved over the originals and are far larger with a huge number of new details here and there. The levels are also far more complex than the ones seen in previous Dooms as well, mainly because they now have movable architecture. Also, there's far more to do in these levels than the ones previously. The gameplay is pretty much identical to the earlier games. You shoot monsters and they die. However, Doom 64 features quite a few puzzle-solving elements. For example, you have to get this blue keycard on this crate. In order to do that, you have to pick a switch that stops it from teleporting and lowers the crate that it's on. Choose wrong and get crushed.
You chose poorly.
It's little things like this that really make Doom 64 its own game. You would never have seen that in Doom 1 and 2. It's almost like this is a sequel to those two games rather than just a mere port. But we will get into the concept of Doom 64 being a sequel a little later. The music for Doom 64 is rather different from the earlier Doom games. Doom 1 and 2 had a very rockin' soundtrack, but this soundtrack is more of the ambient variety. It's a very creepy soundtrack that really does put you on edge after a while. Now, the guns all work like they should, although I like the pistol model in this Doom more than the previous ones, mainly because it actually looks powerful rather than pathetic. The shotgun is a good simulacra of the classic Doom shotgun, but it still doesn't quite meet its level of awesomeness. The double barrel is still great, but due to console limitations, you don't actually get to see a reloading animation, but that's only a very minor complaint. The rest of the weapons are just like you would expect, although the chainsaw kind of stands out due to the fact that it has dual chains. Okay, that is one really industrious woodsman. The enemies all pretty much correspond to the ones seen in the first two Dooms, however they are much more scary. Just look at the new Pinky. In the past, he was almost laughable. Now he is actually pretty frightening. You also see a greater variety of enemies as you progress as well. You don't just fight the Doom triumvirate of Zombie Man, Shotgun Guy, and Imp. Rather, you see Zombie Man, Shotgun Guy, and several Imp reskins. Now, on the subject of the Imp, this guy has been turned into something creepy too. In Doom 1 and 2, he was just another minor minion to be terminated with impunity. Here, he actually looks like a force to be reckoned with. Now, despite all of these great attributes, there were many complaints. Now, by 1997, the Doom style controls were kind of of outdated, it was stiff and you couldn't jump or crouch. Furthermore, there were only some 30 auto levels compared to the 60 or so in the PS1 version. For me, both of these really aren't issues at all. You never really will be wishing you could look up and down, and let's face it, platforming was one of the big deficiencies in Turok. And as for the lack of levels, well, you have 30 or so new levels in a new game, whereas in Doom on the PSX you have 60 levels of a downgraded Doom experience. Really, Doom 64 should not be looked at as a port, but rather as another chapter in the Doom saga. A Doom 3 before there was a Doom 3. Because this game stands on its own. It has new enemies, new levels, and more or less new looking weapons. Now back in the 90s, I never actually owned Doom 64, nor did I ever play it. Why, you may ask? Well, because by that point, I had played Doom 1 and 2 to death. And since at that point I still lacked the internet and any real desire to look into it further, I just assumed that Doom 64 was just yet another port of a game that I had already played. And it wasn't until I heard of the Absolution Mod for Doom 2 that I actually gave the game a chance. Essentially, the Absolution Mod is a total conversion for Doom 2 that allows you to play Doom 64 on the PC. And let me tell you, the game has aged quite well. And if you passed it up back in the day, download the mod and find out what you have been missing. And so this is General Lotz signing off.